It has shown that over the last 2.5 years. And that's why the Right Honourable Lady, the member for Putney, was right. The government now have to reach across the aisles. They have to talk to all parties, have to get Parliament to deliver this policy area. But if they're going to do that and do it successfully, they've got to do 3 things. Article 50 has to be extended. No deal has to be taken off the table. And the government has to show that when there is a deal agreed, that will be put to the British people with the option of remaining in the EU. That, I think, can get consensus. That could be delivered. That could bring the House together. At the moment, we're just hearing the Conservative Party blaming everyone else but themselves. They blame the Remainers. They blame the opposition. They blame the Governor of the Bank of England. Sometimes I think they're going to blame sunshine, moonlight, good times and boogie, Mr. Speaker. There's only one group to blame. It's the Conservative Party.
Thank you. Alex Chalk.
Mr. Speaker. A lot of people ask me, and I dare say every honourable member in this House, why on earth would you go into politics? And they ask it particularly at a time like this. But I know the answer, and I know the answer as a Conservative. It's because I believe to my bones in social mobility. Now, I want to make crystal clear, I expect there are people across this House who believe in that. But the issue that divides us is how you come up with solutions, how you go about achieving it, how you unlock potential and seek out the treasure that's in the heart of every man and woman. And I know it's as a Conservative Member of Parliament that it's been possible to provide opportunities in my community in Cheltenham that has allowed people to fulfil that potential. Because my community, although people don't realise it, they say, Cheltenham, for goodness sake, it must be the most affluent place in the country. Not a bit of it. We have some of the most deprived communities anywhere in our country, where people live in generational entrenched poverty. And what has this Conservative Party done for my community? £22 million for a cyber park in Cheltenham, which will allow the finest minds to come in and out of GCHQ to create startups which mean that if there is a person living nearby who has come from generational poverty, but they've got something about them, something which says, I want to better myself, I want to go forward, I want to provide for my family, and I want to build a future. That opportunity exists. Money that has come in the form of over 400 million for a road project. Now you might say, oh, a road project, who cares about that? Road projects are what allow a local community to thrive. It's what allows opportunities to be generated and futures to be created. But it's not just about infrastructure projects. Recognising the issue of homelessness, it's this government that provided £1.3 million for social impact bonds. What does that mean? That means one-on-one support for individuals who can go and address the needs of the most vulnerable in our society, be that drug addiction, be that mental health problems, be that debt. And that has served to make a huge difference in my community, so that it's not just a stronger community economically, but a fairer one too. What's more, £3 million to help deliver social housing in Cheltenham, in Portland Place. So of course there is always room for improvement. Of course there is always more to do. But on that issue of social mobility, which is the party that isn't just talking the talk, but walking the walk, it is this government that is achieving it, this government which is making a difference in my community, and that is why I will vote against this motion tonight.
Gregory Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to commence by saying, since I came into the House in 2001, I've seen a significant increase in the number of people in the chamber right across the divide who have come to speak and vote in favour and in defence of this United Kingdom, compared to what was the case some 17 years ago, and for that I and the people at home are eternally grateful for that, and I'm sure that is shared across the divide. I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that I will be voting against the motion tonight because I retain confidence in this government on the terms and conditions contained in the confidence and supply motion that we entered into some time ago. But I want to, at this stage, offer a piece of critical advice to my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister. And it is this. In the past year and a half, I believe that her negotiations have not best served this United Kingdom. And I believe last night's defeat, the scale of the defeat, can offer her and us an opportunity for a revised position by her. And I believe that that should be a condition, that she goes back to the EU and makes it very, very clear, just as she hasn't done up to now, that whenever they say a deal is only doable if it contains the backstop that we have arranged and agreed with you, that she goes back to them and says, agree is doable, an agreement is doable, but not on the terms and conditions of that backstop, because that backstop creates a division, a cleavage, a divorce within our United Kingdom, and we are not prepared to enter into any agreement that is based on that backstop. And it is only when she gets to that stage that we get Mr Juncker last night, as he said, after he realised the scale of the defeat, after the possibility of what may emerge beyond last night's defeat could emerge in subsequent weeks, when he made the statement, which I think has not been commented upon, it is that we, the EU, are determined to get a deal. He wasn't saying that 6 months ago. He wasn't saying that 6 weeks ago. But he is saying it now, and the reason he's saying it now is because the appearance of no deal on the horizon has now suddenly galvanised the EU nation states, and our Prime Minister has got to take advantage of that now and has got to say to the EU, we are prepared to get a deal, but we are prepared to get a good deal and a reasonable deal. Not a one-way deal like the deal that fell last night, but a deal that delivers both for the UK and for the EU. It is on that basis that I will be voting against the motion tonight, Mr Speaker.
Thank you. Rebecca Powell.
And I rise to speak because I believe that this government is the right government to carry on with its serious work that it has begun, not just on Brexit, but on so many other important issues affecting our daily lives. And because I believe that a chain of events that might lead to a general election will in no way be good for the country. And because I am genuinely fearful of what might happen if this great country, but especially our businesses, should get into the hands of the member for Islington North. Should he ever get his hands on the tiller, this country will not be in safe hands. An election will certainly not solve the impending business at hand, which is delivering on our relationship with the EU. So, I believe that this government is the best government to deliver for us, not just nationally, but also locally. That's what's really important to me as the MP for Taunton Deane. And in my constituency, since the Conservatives have been in power, we have delivered more than any other government. There are more people in work than ever before in Taunton Deane, more SMEs setting up. There is more funding coming our way thanks to a strong economy. That's why my calls for 79 million for the new theatres in the hospital were agreed to and accepted, and that's why we got an additional 11 million for more health services locally. We've had more funding for infrastructure, 28 million. We are upgrading the A358, we are upgrading the Toneway, we are upgrading the motorway junction. We've got 7 million to enable a road through Staple Grove where more housing is being built. We are building more housing than ever before in Taunton Deane, Mr Speaker, and that's because of this strong economy. There is a great deal going on, and more children in Taunton Deane are getting a better education than ever before, and we're building a new special school. All of these things are only possible with a strong economy and with an understanding of what business needs. We've cut the Labour's astonishing deficit by 4/5, which has restored the public finances. Finally, I want to touch on the environment, and it won't surprise people, this government has an unparalleled record on working for the environment, and we must continue with our great work, which is another good reason why we need to leave the EU. I am backing the Prime Minister. She will come up with a deal. We must do it with compromise. We must work as a team on these benches. We must listen to the other side, but we must pull off Brexit. And I am confident that this government, with its track record on the economy and all of the other things it's delivered, including on the environment, is the right government to do, and to do it successfully and to do it fairly, so that we leave future generations able to carry on the good work we've set in place and to live in a fair and wonderful economy and take this great nation into the future.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The famous phrase is that a fish rots from the head down. It is a recognition that bad leadership infects all that it touches. And what greater example of that than this present government? The rot isn't confined to Downing Street, it is infecting the whole country. Not strong and stable, but stubborn and self-obsessed. And Brexit is by far the clearest, but no means the only example. Frankly, the Prime Minister has turned Brexit into some modern-day bizarre Schleswig-Holstein question. Something that Palmerston himself claimed was so complicated only 3 people understood it. One was dead, one who'd been driven mad by it, and one who'd forgotten it altogether. But the truth is, this isn't a complicated situation. It's her red lines that have killed her deal. It's her red lines that have driven this Parliament mad. And it's her red lines that are best forgotten. This infectious failure has covered all bases. This is a government that can't organise a tailback on the M20. A government presiding over a shortage of nurses while stockpiling fridges. A government alienating our EU citizen neighbours whilst deporting our Windrush families. A government obsessed with what stickers are on the Speaker's wife's car, whilst ignoring the pleas for help with issues like knife crime. The roll call goes on and on. Universal credit, homelessness, the cost of living, the refugees crying out for sanctuary, the human rights of the women of Northern Ireland. At every turn, this government cannot get a grip, and those burning injustices burn harder as a result. This country is divided, this Parliament is divided, the deadlock is deepening, not dissolving, and the Prime Minister can't even be bothered to pick up a phone. That's right. No party can continue to prevaricate whilst the far right goes stronger. It will not stop with Brexit, and Brexit does not deal with the crisis of confidence in our politics we all now face. We are not the only country facing difficult choices or challenges, but we are the only country that thinks because it's the mother of all democracies, there's nothing wrong with how we approach things. Change has got to come for all our stakes, but for that to happen, it has to start at the top, and we have to stop the rot.
You Merriman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to speak not just on behalf of Brenda from Bristol, but all of the Brendas in Bexhill and Battle, who are probably feeling right now that the last thing we all want is a general election. But what we do want is our Parliament and all of our MPs to work better together and fix the issues of our day. And I've enjoyed this afternoon because I've had the opportunity to listen to many feelings, hopes, aspirations. But it depresses me that we still are in a position where people would rather shout at each other in this chamber as opposed to reaching out to each other, working out where we can identify issues that are common to us all and try and fix them. And in my constituency, I'm very proud of things that this government have helped me deliver since I was elected in 2015. All of my secondary schools have now moved to good or outstanding. I had the Secretary of State for Health come and spend time seeing our health service joined up with our social care team on Friday of last. And that made me very proud to see all these amazing leaders really working as one, working together. And again, I think that's a very good example for Parliament. Now, of course, I'm not naive. I recognise the opposition have to oppose and the government have to govern. I'm also not so naive that there are not big challenges in my constituency. That's why I'll be having a task force on homelessness, because I've noticed the streets in Bexhill getting worse. I've also noticed more casework from my constituents because there are not this levels of services available that there once were. So, of course, many points made by opposition members are correct. But equally, we now have more people in employment than we ever have done before. So it can't all be as bad as is being said on that side of the bench, and perhaps it can't all be as good as is sometimes said on this side of the bench. If we all took that attitude into this place and worked out how we could fix things which really matter to people, we might also be able to fix the issues of Brexit. But I will touch, to my point, on a matter that I thought we'd have got fixed by now when I got elected in 2015, social care reform. It's within us in this House to fix things for the most vulnerable and often the most elderly people in our communities. We agree on so much. A wealth tax set on this side, opposite of the House. On our side, in our manifesto, we talked a lot more about the fact that people should pay more. We're almost there. yet our hatred sometimes of each other just stops us reaching out. And when it comes to reaching out, Mr. Speaker, there's one thing I would like my government to do to really show that they are listening. The charge of £65 for an EU citizen to maintain and have the same rights that they enjoyed before we in this country took the step in the referendum. That does not feel fair to me, and I speak to many on both sides of the chamber who also feel it's not fair. Surely, if the government is listening, we reach out not just to them, but also to every member in this House who agrees with that, be they Leavers or Remainers, and really offer that olive branch. If we start in that particular way, perhaps others will appreciate the government is listening, and perhaps then we will work better together in the manner that our constituents expect from us all.
Alison Thewlis.
Mr. Speaker, I have no confidence in this government, and I never have done. I've got no confidence because of the way that the DWP treat people. I have no confidence because of the constituent who was sanctioned because they were visiting their dying father. I've got no confidence because my constituents was sanctioned while waiting to start a job with the DWP. I've got no sanction because of the way that people are treated on PIP. I've got no confidence because of the way that the two-child policy and the rape clause has been pursued against vulnerable women in our society, and it must be scrapped. I have no confidence because of the closure of Glasgow's job centres. I have no confidence because of the implementation of the hostile environment, of refugees left waiting, and of constituents who have not been able to be with their families. I have no confidence because of the constituent who lost out on his wife's visa because he was under the threshold by £7, Mr. Speaker. I have no confidence in this government because of the good character test that's being applied to children who can't get citizenship because this government thinks they are not of good character enough. And Mr. Speaker, while we are on good character, I've got no confidence in this government because the Home Office told my constituent he could not get citizenship because he had volunteered with the Red Cross, and that was a sign of bad character too. I have no confidence in this government because of their pursuance of Section 3225 of the immigration rules, where people lost out on getting leave to remain because they had made a legitimate change to their tax returns, and the government thought that that was somehow wrong. I have no confidence in this government because of their abject failure to deal with Scottish limited partnerships and to reform Companies House. It's almost as if they like money laundering in this country, Mr. Speaker. I have no confidence in this government because of the refusal, despite all evidence, to allow Glasgow to pursue supervised drug consumption rooms. It is well expected that drug deaths in Scotland will top 1,000 this coming year, but the government refuses to do so for ideological reasons. I have absolutely no confidence in them for doing so. I have no confidence in this government because they fail to realise that young people deserve a fair day's pay for a fair day's work. The under-25s are not worth the same when they go out to work, and that this pretendy living wage fails to give people the dignity and work that they deserve. I have no confidence in this government because of their failure to tackle the real present danger that Brexit will cause to all of our constituents, that they put their head in their sand, that they refuse to accept the single market and the customs union as the best way forward. And Mr. Speaker, I do have confidence in the people in my constituency. I have confidence in the people of Glasgow and the people of Scotland who voted for independence with such hope in 2014. And I know that when Scotland gets its chance again, it will have no confidence in this government and lots of confidence in themselves.
James Cartledge.
Mr. Speaker, and I am sure, Mr. Speaker, at some point in your life it is possible that you have owned a copy of that famous political book, The Downing Street Years, by Margaret Thatcher. And if so, given your memory, you may well recall the opening sentence of that book. The very first words read, "Ayes 311, noes 310. The result of the no confidence vote in 1979, which brought Margaret Thatcher to power." And I say to my colleagues tonight, how would you feel if in a few years from now, browsing in the bookstore was a copy of The Downing Street Years by the Leader of the Opposition, and the opening sentence was a narrow defeat in a vote of confidence which led to a new era in British politics? Because we all know that it wouldn't be like the new era that the previous one I referred to brought in. 1979, it ushered in an era when free enterprise became back in the heart of British politics. We went through the difficult period of adjustment of our economy that culminated in the end of socialism and the fall of the Berlin Wall, the greatest victory in the history of modern conservatism. Instead, we would bring in a different era. All of that would be turned back. A return to nationalisation, command and control. The idea that the state knows best. Confiscatory tax rates, not education, but regulation. And I say this to you, Mr. Speaker, I am proud to stand on this side tonight. I became a Conservative after seeing what it was like in Eastern Europe, my experience of the true face of that supposedly compassionate ideology. And those who turned a blind eye to it should be ashamed of it. I started with Callaghan, I'm going to finish with Callaghan, Mr. Speaker. Not the former Labour Prime Minister, but Detective Inspector Harry Callaghan of the San Francisco Police Department. Because I say, if anyone thinks it's a good idea that Labour win the no confidence vote tonight and then get into power, all I can say is, I hope you're feeling lucky.
Clive Lewis.
Some members opposite have been calling into question the motivations of the opposition for calling this no confidence vote. Let's be clear, Mr. Speaker, yesterday's vote wasn't just a defeat, it was a complete and utter rout. Now, some members in today's debate have been talking about historical parallels, but I think if that had been a battle, it would have to compare to the Battle of Cannae, where Hannibal annihilated the Roman army. A textbook defeat, just like last night, was a textbook example of arrogance and hubris in government. But, last night's vote aside, let's run through some of the myriad of reasons why I and we on this side of the House have no confidence in this government. In-work poverty at 4 million people, homelessness soaring. Yesterday, in my city of Norwich and Norfolk, 38 out of 53 of our children's centres are being closed. Why? Because Norfolk County Council have said this government's cuts are forcing that on them. A day of complete shame in my city. And without a hint of irony, this government, whilst closing down our children's centres, has declared Norwich an opportunity area as it attempts to improve failing social mobility. Mr. Speaker, it's a policy akin to attempting to fit up a bath with no plug. In education, schools face real terms funding cuts. In The Guardian today, Norfolk County Council again in the media, under fire from the local government ombudsman for failing to address and to look after the concerns of children with special education needs. On mental health, after the PM personally promised to improve this Cinderella service, Norfolk and Suffolk Mental Health Foundation Trust has been put into special measures again, 3 times in 4 years. The first of any trust in the country that has happened to. Real terms funding at this day and age now down 13%, demand up by 50%. But I also want to turn to an issue that I believe this House and particularly this government have failed to adequately address, and that's the impending climate catastrophe and biodiversity loss. This, above all else, given the timescales that we are talking, is basically a calamity waiting to happen that this government is comprehensively failing on. Time after time, we hear the greenwash from the benches opposite that they are going to do what it takes to do on the environment. They slash soda subsidies, 9,000 job losses. Fracking has been announced and put forward and is now actually happening. But not just in this country, they're also doing it in China as well with taxpayers' money. The climate science tells us that you need to leave this in the ground, 80% of it. It can't happen. And in the words of that famous Delia Smith, that legend of Norwich, I will say to the benches of it opposite, let's be having ya, let's have that general election, let's have that vote, support this motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There are moments in this chamber for political knockabout. There are moments in this chamber for consensus. And there are moments in this chamber for constructive debate. And I am very, very disappointed that at this point in time, when we have such an important, momentous decision to make about how we take forwards our exit from the European Union, we are having this debate today. But I appreciate that yesterday's vote is the reason why it's been called. But what would make this maybe slightly better would be if it wasn't the fact the Leader of the Opposition has hasn't just called this debate now, but all he's said for weeks and weeks and months, whenever he's been asked his position on Brexit, he's been unable to give a clear answer. All he's been able to do is say he wants a general election. And he continues. I sincerely hope that after this evening, when I believe he will lose this vote, he will move on and start giving some clarity on his position on Brexit. But it is simply not fair to the country that the opposition cannot put together their own position. At this point in time, when I recognise that here in Parliament we need to come together and solve how we leave the European Union. That is what businesses, particularly my constituents, are calling for us to do, is move forward and get on with it. But also what I hear from businesses more often than not is not that their concern is so much about the uncertainty of Brexit, it's what would happen if the leader of the opposition were to become Prime Minister, and if his party and his hard left version of Labour were to take charge of our economy and our country, because that would be the worst possible thing for our country. I would have no confidence on behalf of my constituents of what he and his government would do for our economy, our security, or even for our public services. He may claim to be a champion of our public services. Not only would they be completely unsustainable, unfundable under his economic model, but also have no confidence that he'd be able to improve their performance as we have in government, whether it's in schools, where children are now learning to read, which is the fundamentals for them having a better opportunity in life, whether it's in the National Health Service, where, as we heard last week, we now have a long-term plan for a sustainable National Health Service and funded sustainably. So I look forward to for us to continue delivering on these commitments in government. But first, we need to move on and deliver Brexit. These are difficult times, not just in the UK, but for countries across the Western world. We need to come together, we need to move forward, we need to deliver on Brexit, continue making Britain a better place to live, and build our place in the world outside the European Union.
A Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of the Leader of the Opposition's motion. As a teacher and head teacher throughout my career, trust has always been very important to me. The trust children had in me as their teacher, and the trust that teachers had in me as their head teacher, to understand their needs and make the right decisions on their behalf. Trust in relationships and in the workplace is crucial. Today, this debate isn't about whether the Prime Minister has the ability to make decisions on our behalf. It's about whether we trust her to understand the mood of the country, the zeitgeist, and the needs of every region and demographic, and make the right decisions. This government has suffered the biggest parliamentary defeat in history, been found in contempt of Parliament, overseen the steepest rise in poverty, and averaged a resignation per month. I trust the leader of our opposition and the shadow front bench as people who understand the struggles that many in our country are facing. I trust them to have the compassion and intellect to understand and empathise with the people of this country, and to be able to make the decisions which will improve all our lives. Is the Prime Minister a good public servant? Yes. Does she work hard? Yes. Do I respect her? Yes. I respect anyone who devotes their life to public service. But is the Prime Minister a diplomat? Does she show warmth and empathy? No. Is she able to negotiate with the other 27 countries in the EU in our interests? No. Clearly not. I don't trust our Prime Minister to represent our country and to negotiate a deal which is in the best interest of the people of Combe Valley, my constituents, or our country. For me, this is not just about whether we are in the EU or not. It's about the kind of society I want my granddaughter to live in.
Absolutely.
Just before Christmas, my 5-year-old granddaughter came into Parliament for the first time, and she loved it. Fast forward 30 years when she's a grown woman. Do I want her to inherit the world determined by this government? No, I don't. I wonder how she will judge this government's handling of Brexit when she's a grown woman. I see it as a full-blown display of incompetence focused purely on party interests and failing to take strong action to protect jobs and the economy, workers' rights and environmental protections and national security. I don't trust this government with my constituents' future, my granddaughter's future or our country's future. I have therefore no confidence in this government. I do trust a person like the opposition leader to understand diplomacy.
Thank you. Jack Brereton.
Speaker, when I was elected, my constituents in Stoke-on-Trent South were quite clear. They voted overwhelmingly for Brexit, and they were overwhelmingly in rejection of what this Labour Party has become and what it now stands for. The Momentum-led Labour Party does not represent predominantly working-class communities like mine in the Midlands and the North. Years of Labour has done nothing to improve my city in Stoke-on-Trent, quite the reverse, decimating our local industries with our local communities taking the brunt and being left behind. Since Conservatives came to power, Stoke-on-Trent's industries have started to blossom again, with record numbers of people working and the best places to start a new business now being Stoke-on-Trent. This success is thanks to, yes, the hard work of our businesses and our communities, but most significantly, the policies of Conservatives. We have seen a government that has transformed our economy from the ruins of Labour's crash to one of the most successful developed economies. By supporting local businesses to grow, invest and take on more people, we have seen over 3.4 million more people in work, with unemployment at a record low, measures to keep taxes low and introducing a national living wage. A basic rate taxpayer is now over £1,200 better off than they were in 2010.
The clock. Stop the clock. Order. The honourable gentleman, I know that the House is excited, but the honourable gentleman must get a respectful hearing. Jack Brereton.
Mr. Speaker, we must continue to pursue measures which will help address the cost of living and focus on growing aspirations, creating better opportunities and job prospects for our communities. This would be threatened by a Labour government led by the Leader of the Opposition. Their unfunded plans of £1 trillion of extra spending would see us racking up huge debts and mean massive tax rises for people in constituencies like mine who can least afford. And for what? Ideologically motivated white elephants, nationalisations of our industries, raiding the public purse to pursue policies which have been tried and failed time and again, threatening jobs in our industries and our economic prosperity. Every time we've had a Labour government, they have left our country with more people out of work than they started. And as I've said many times before, my constituency in Stoke-on-Trent South voted overwhelmingly to leave. At every opportunity I have voted in this House to enact Brexit and deliver for the wishes of my constituents. For this House to go against that and the British public, and most of my constituents voted for, would be a total betrayal of democracy. But this is what the significant proportion of MPs on the benches opposite want. They have repeatedly voted for measures to thwart Brexit, frustrating and trying to prevent and delay us from leaving on the 29th of March. This motion today shows the Labour leadership would rather play party politics than put the national interest in our country first. The Labour leader has been clear. They want a general election, going against the majority who are fed up with politicians and want us to get on with delivering for our country.
Paul Sweeney.
When I think of the confidence I have in this government, I think about how it's treated the most vulnerable people in our country. When I think of my constituents, I think of a 10-year-old boy who was orphaned when his mother died, and this government, instead of nurturing him and trying to care for him and provide him with security, threatened to deport him. I thought that was a most shameful act, a disgrace, and is typical of this government's hostile environment policy. And that is why I have no confidence in this government, for that and many other reasons, about how it's treated my constituents and many vulnerable people across this country, but also how they have handled this negotiation in such a feckless and dysfunctional manner. They couldn't agree ahead of time what the negotiating objectives were. There was no spirit of collaboration. Even after the Prime Minister lost her majority in this place, there was no attempt to form a collegiate basis to agree negotiating objectives for this country and to deliver for this country's national interest. That was not achieved. Indeed, this government has subverted democracy at every turn when it suited its interests, even though it does not command a majority of the popular consent of the people or even a majority in this House of Commons. It has packed its select committees with Tory majorities, even though it is a hung parliament, by procedural sleight of hand. It repeatedly seeks to circumvent or abuse the Sewell Conventions in its dealings with the devolved administrations. And indeed, this government became the first administration in parliamentary history to be held in contempt of Parliament. I have to give way to my honourable friend.
Does my honourable friend agree that in Scotland people will be watching this thinking it's an absolute shambles? It's been absolutely roughshod over, and we have no trust, no faith at all in this government. We need a general election now. Hey, hey.
No, friend, we absolutely need a general election because there is no way to clear this impasse. There is a clear lack of faith in the government. There's a clear lack of will from the government to engage productively in reaching out to build a national consensus to achieve the way forward. It's now the job of Parliament to take control, and the only way to do that is to reset the clock, have a general election, allow a new mandate to be formed in the interests of delivering for the people of this country. That is the only way to do it, and that's why I'll be supporting the motion of the Leader of the Opposition tonight to bring down this failing government and deliver a mandate that will act in the national interests of this country.
Yes, 1 minute. 2 minutes. Luke Graham.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'll try and keep this very short. I rise tonight in support of this government motion, mainly because I hear the frustrations of the people in this country from my constituents, and we hear it here in this House. There is confusion, whether it is on our split party position. We're criticised for red lines, but all we hear from Labour are their blurred lines, their lack of clear direction, their inability to come with a constructive alternative to what the government is being put forward. Mr. Speaker, parties of all colours failed to make a constructive case for the United Kingdom's position in the European Union. And many contributions we've heard in this chamber this afternoon have lamented that fact. Many of them have been driven by anger, and that's fine. Anger is an easy emotion, and it's one that many of our constituents feel. But when party politics fail and policies fall down, it is when MPs need to step up. And that's what we need to do in the coming weeks. What's come from the defeat last night is a clear determination from my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, to reach out across this chamber, to come back with different proposals, to listen to people from across the political spectrum, and not those who stand up in this chamber and say they work in the national interest, but they only work in the nationalist interest, but actually those MPs who are here to genuinely serve their constituents and protect and preserve our United Kingdom. Mr. Speaker, it is incredibly easy to criticise, but we cannot abdicate our responsibilities as members of Parliament for what we were elected to do. Our constituents don't want another general election, they want us to get on with our jobs.
Thank you. Tom Watson!
this is a crucial moment in our nation's history. But it is an unenviable task to summarise this debate today and to ask members of this House to pass judgment on her stewardship of our country. First, let me say very clearly that I am not one of those people who questions her motives. I agree with the Honourable Member for Stirling, who claimed she was motivated by public duty. I don't doubt that she has sincerely attempted to fulfil the task given to us by the voters in this referendum. I have no doubt too that she has tried her best and given it her all. But she has failed. And I'm afraid the failure is hers. And it's hers alone. And I'm certain that every member of this House admires her resilience to suffer the humiliations on a global stage that she has done would have finished off weaker people far sooner. Yet the reality is that if the Prime Minister really sat down and thought carefully about the implications of that defeat last night for our country, she would have resigned. Throughout history, Prime Ministers have tried their best and failed. There's no disgrace in that. That's politics. But this Prime Minister has chosen one last act of defiance, not just defying the laws of politics, but defying the laws of mathematics. And it was Disraeli who said, "A majority is always better than the best repartee." She is a Prime Minister without a majority for her flagship policy, with no authority and no plan B. 432 to 202. Mr. Speaker, that is not a mere flesh wound. No one doubts her determination, which is generally an admirable quality, but misapplied it can be toxic. And the cruelest truth of all is that she doesn't possess the necessary skills, the political skills, the empathy, the ability, and most crucially, the policy to lead this country any longer. Now, I know there are many good people in the government. They will be examining their consciences as the clock runs down on these Brexit negotiations. Because she has refused to resign, we now face a choice between a general election to sort out this mess or continued paralysis under her leadership. But now the ante has been raised. The government has been defeated on a Brexit plan that has been its sole reason for existing for the past 2.5 years. It has not just been defeated on the most crucial issue facing our country, it has suffered the worst defeat of any British government in history. And the clock is ticking. MPs have shown that they're ready to take back control over what has been, from start to finish, a failed Brexit process. But the question facing the House tonight is whether it is worth giving this failed Prime Minister another chance to go back pleading to Brussels, another opportunity to humiliate the United Kingdom, another few weeks to waste precious time. Our answer tonight must be a resounding no. And let me remind you why. It was this Prime Minister who chose to lay down red lines that never commanded the support of Parliament. It was this Prime Minister who refused to guarantee the rights of EU nationals who've made their lives and their homes in this country. It was this Prime Minister who time and again tried to shut Parliament out, refusing to give us a meaningful vote, refusing to release the legal advice to the deal. She's treated this place and its members on all sides with utter disdain. Mr. Speaker, it was the member for Gainsborough who said the road to tyranny is paved with executives ignoring parliaments. Yet that is what she has done. And so Parliament is having to assert its rightful authority. And at every turn, she has chosen division over unity. She's not tried to bring the 17 million people that voted Leave and the 16 million people that voted Remain together. She should have tried to assure those who voted Remain. Instead, she chose to placate the most extreme of her colleagues on the Leave side of the debate. That has left the nation more divided than it was in June 2016. Out on the streets, in homes, in schools, in hospitals, people are struggling and take no hope and no strength from this ailing government. What happened to those burning injustices she said it was her mission to fight when she came into office? Racism, classism, homelessness, insecure jobs. They've all grown and burned brighter than ever before. And for so much of this, she is responsible. If the House declares its no confidence in the government tonight, it will open the possibility of a general election and a decisive change in direction for our country on Brexit, a decisive change in direction for workers, for young people and for our vital services. Mr. Speaker, the Right Honourable Lady will forever be known as the nothing has changed Prime Minister. But something must change. So our only choice left is to change her and her government in a general election. We know she's worked hard, but the truth is she's too set in her ways, too aloof to lead. She lacks the imagination and agility to bring people with her. She lacks the authority on the world stage to negotiate this deal. Ultimately, she has failed. It's not through lack of effort. It's not through lack of dedication. And I think the country recognises that effort. In fact, the country feels genuinely sorry for the Prime Minister. I feel sorry for the Prime Minister. But she cannot confuse pity for political legitimacy, sympathy for sustainable support. The evidence is clear. And I know that out of loyalty to party, members opposite will want to support the Prime Minister in the vote this evening. But everyone in this chamber, no matter which lobby they go through tonight, know in their hearts that this Prime Minister is not capable of getting a deal through. The members on the opposite benches know it. They know, we know that they know it. The country knows it, which is why we must act. That is why we need something new. That is why we need a general election. I commend this motion to the House.
Mr. Speaker, as you know, having sat throughout this entire debate, it has been a passionate debate characterised by many excellent speeches. And I commend the members for Tiverton and Honiton, Bolton West, East Surrey, Mid Norfolk, Plymouth Moor View, Broxtowe, Stirling, Dudley South, Faversham and Stoke-on-Trent South on my side for a series of outstanding speeches. Yeah. But it has also been the case, as the Shadow Secretary of State pointed out, that there have been many powerful speeches from the opposition benches as well. And I too, like him, want to pay particular tribute to the members for Warrington North, Gedling, Ilford North and Birmingham Hodge Hill for moving and passionate speeches. Their constituencies are lucky to have them as advocates for their concerns and their needs. But perhaps the bravest and the finest speech that came from the opposition benches was given by the member for Barrow in Furness. It takes courage. It takes courage, and he has it, having been elected on a Labour mandate, representing working class people, to say that the leader of the party that you joined as a boy is not fit to be Prime Minister. He speaks for his constituents. He speaks for the country. And that takes me to the speech from the Shadow Secretary of State. He spoke well. But I felt he did not rise to the level of events. But one thing that was characteristic about his speech, he did not once mention in his speech the leader of the opposition or why he should be Prime Minister. Now,
he doesn't want him to be Prime Minister.
Yes. I have a lot of time for the honourable member. We have several things in common. He's lost weight recently. Sorry, we've both lost weight recently, I should say. Him much more so. We're both friends of Israel. Him much more so. And we both recognise that the member for Islington North is about the worst possible person to lead the Labour Party. Him much more so. Now, as well as great speeches from the backbenches, we also had some interesting speeches from the front benches. We had a speech of over 20 minutes from my great friend, the leader of the Scottish National Party in this place. But again, in those 20 minutes, he did not once mention the common fisheries policy. I think everyone in Scotland who recognises the potential to free ourselves from the common fisheries policy which Brexit provides will note that in 20 minutes of precious parliamentary time, the SNP didn't mention them, aren't interested in them, and as far as the fishing people of Scotland are concerned, the SNP have literally nothing to say. I must now turn to the speech from the leader of the Liberal Democrats, someone whom I also have affection and respect for, and he made a number of good points. But he also said that he regretted the referendum. This is from the party that was the first in this House to say that we should have a referendum on EU membership. And because he doesn't like the result of the last referendum, he now wants another referendum. The Liberal Democrat policy on referendums is not the policy of Gladstone or Lloyd George, it's the policy of Vicky Pollard. No, but yeah, but no, but yeah. I should also commend the speech given by the leader of the Democratic Unionist Party. He explained that he had been inundated with text messages today from people who were saying, please, 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 people in this House, please, please, please back the government tonight. And some of those text messages had even come from Conservatives. And I think, critically, when we think about confidence in this country and in this government, there is a daily vote of confidence which is being executed by the individuals investing in this country, creating jobs and opportunity for all our citizens. Under this government, this country remains the most successful country for foreign direct investment of any country in Europe, with more than £1.3 billion being invested in the last year. That is why Forbes magazine says that this country is the best destination for new jobs in the world. It's why the independent organisation JLL say the best place for the future of services in the world is here in the United Kingdom. It is why, once again, London has been recorded by independent inspectors as the best place in the world for tech investment. And we see that when Spanish rail firms like Talgo shortlist 6 destinations for investment for new rolling stock, all 6 in the United Kingdom. When Boeing opened a new factory in Sheffield to create jobs for British workers. When Chanel moved from France to London in order to establish a new corporate headquarters.
Smells good.
And when Starbucks moved from Amsterdam to London in order to ensure more investment and jobs. The opposition should wake up and smell the coffee. And all of this, in the words of the BBC, despite Brexit. Now that investment, those jobs that have been created under my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister's inspirational leadership, has been invested in public services and social justice. As we heard from the member for Dudley South and Bexhill and Battle, 1.9 million more children in good and outstanding schools. It is also the case that the gap between the poorest and the richest in our schools has narrowed under this Conservative government. We also have a record level of investment in the NHS, and thanks to my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Health, a 10-year plan, £20 billion investment, £394 million extra extra every week for our NHS. And we also have investment in our national security. We meet the 2% target for investment in NATO, and we have 2 new aircraft carriers capable of projecting British force and influence across the world in defence of freedom and democracy. And in contrast, while we are standing up for national security, what about the Right Honourable Gentleman, the member for Islington North? He wants to leave NATO. He wants to get rid of our nuclear deterrent. And recently in a speech he said, why do countries boast about the size of their armies? That is quite wrong. Why don't we emulate Costa Rica that has no army at all? No allies, no deterrent, no army. No way can this country ever allow that man to be our Prime Minister and in charge of our national security. But if he can't support our fighting men and women, no. Who does he support? Who does he stand beside? Well, it was fascinating to discover that the Right Honourable Gentleman, the Leader of the Opposition, was there when a wreath was laid. A wreath was laid to commemorate those who were involved in the massacre at the Munich Olympics of Israeli athletes. Now, he says he was present but not involved. Present but not involved sums him up when it comes to national security. When this House voted to bomb the fascists of ISIS after an inspirational speech by the member for Leeds Central, in which 66 people, including the Shadow Secretary of State, voted with this government in order to defeat fascism, I'm afraid that the Honourable Gentleman, the Leader of the Opposition, was not with us. In fighting fascism, he was present but not involved. And similarly, when this House voted to take the action necessary, when Vladimir Putin executed an act of terrorism on our soil, there were many Labour members, many good Labour members, who stood up to support what we were doing, but not the Right Honourable Gentleman when we were fighting
Order! Point of order, Daniel Rennie. If it is a genuine point of order.
The government, how is this relevant? And is this not dangerous?
If the Secretary of State were out of order, I'd have said so. I didn't, because he isn't. Secretary of State.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And if the Leader of the Opposition won't stand up against Putin when he attacks people in this country, if he won't stand up against fascists when they are running riot in Syria, if he will not stand up for this country when the critical national security questions are being asked, how can we possibly expect him to stand up for us in European negotiations? Will he stand up for us against Spain over Gibraltar? Will he stand up against the Commission in order to ensure that we get a good deal? Of course he won't, because he won't even stand up for his own members of Parliament. Why is it that a Labour Member of Parliament needs armed protection at her own party conference? Why is it that nearly half of female Labour MPs wrote to the Leader of the Opposition to say that he was not standing up against the vilification and the abuse that they received online, which was being carried out in his name? If he cannot protect his own members of Parliament, if he cannot protect the proud traditions of the Labour Party, how can he possibly protect this country? We cannot have confidence in him to lead. We have confidence in this government, which is why I commend this motion.
Order! Under the order of the House! Under the order of the House of today, I am now required to put the question. The question is that this House has no confidence in Her Majesty's government. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. No. Division! Clear the lobby! Order. The question is that this House has no confidence in Her Majesty's government. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. No. Tellers for the ayes, Jessica Morden and Jeff Smith. Tellers for the noes, Julian Smith and Christopher Pincher.
The ayes to the right, 306. The noes to the left, 325.
The ayes to the right, 306. The noes to the left, 325. So the noes have it. The noes have it. Unlock. Point of order, the Prime Minister.
On a point of order, Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased that this House has expressed its confidence in the government tonight. I do not take this responsibility lightly, and my government will continue its work to increase our prosperity, guarantee our security, and to strengthen our union. And yes, we will also continue to work to deliver on the solemn promise we made to the people of this country to deliver on the result of the referendum and leave the European Union. I believe this duty is shared by every member of this House, and we have a responsibility to identify a way forward that can secure the backing of the House. To that end, I've proposed a series of meetings between senior parliamentarians and representatives of the government over the coming days, and I would like to invite the leaders of parliamentary parties to meet with me individually, and I would like to start these meetings tonight. Mr. Speaker, the government approaches these meetings in a constructive spirit, and I urge others to do the same. But we must find solutions that are negotiable and command sufficient support in this House. And, as I've said, we will return to the House on Monday to table an amendable motion and to make a statement about the way forward. The House has put its confidence in this government. I stand ready to work with any member of this House to deliver on Brexit and ensure that this House retains the confidence of the British people.
Point of order, Mr. Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last night the House rejected the government's conclusion of its negotiations with the European...
Order. I called the Prime Minister on a point of order, and the Prime Minister was heard. And she was heard in relative tranquility and certainly with courtesy. And the same courtesy will be extended to the Leader of the Opposition and to others who seek to raise points of order. That's the way it is. Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last night, the House rejected the government's deal, emphatically. A week ago, the House voted to condemn the idea of a no-deal Brexit. Before there can be any positive discussions about the way forward, the government must remove clearly, once and for all, the prospect of the catastrophe of a no-deal Brexit from the EU and all the chaos that would come as a result of that. And I invite the Prime Minister to confirm now that the government will not countenance a no-deal Brexit from the European Union.
A point of order, Mr. Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I must say that I welcome the offer of talks from the Prime Minister. I think it's important, Mr. Speaker, that all of us recognise the responsibility that we have, and on the back of the defeat of the government's motion last night, that we have to work together where we can to find a way forward. I commit the Scottish National Party to working constructively with the government. However, I do think it's important. I do think it is important in that regard that we make it clear to the Prime Minister, in a spirit of openness in these talks, that the issue of extending Article 50 of a people's vote and avoiding a no deal have to be on the table. We have to agree to enter these talks on the basis that we can move forward and achieve a result which will unify all the nations of the United Kingdom.
Thank you. Point of order, Sir Edward Davey, and then I'll come to the right honourable.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. From the Liberal Democrat position, we are clear that we want to engage with talks with Her Majesty's government. But it's very important that the government makes clear that no deal is not an option. It's very, very important the Prime Minister, as she actually, to be fair to her, earlier today didn't do, rule out extending Article 50. It's important that the House has that chance to think and come together. And finally, I would ask the Prime Minister, will she ensure, Mr. Speaker, that this House gets a chance to take control of our own business as we go through the next few days and weeks?
Thank you. Point of order, Mr. Nigel Dodds.
Mr. Speaker, and the result of the motion of no confidence tonight illustrates the importance of the confidence and supply arrangement that is currently in place between. I'm always delighted when our opponents illustrate the strength of that relationship that we have and what it's delivering for Northern Ireland. And when the people of Northern Ireland see that investment in education and health and infrastructure, they will thank this Parliament and they will thank this party and this government for that extra investment. But can I say this? Can I say this?
Order, Mr. Stone. Normally, order. Very unseemly behaviour. Normally you behave with great dignity in this place. Calm yourself, man. Get a grip. Nigel Dodds.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Can I say, however, that the confidence and supply arrangement, of course, is built upon delivering Brexit on the basis of our shared priorities, and for us that is the Union. And we want to deliver Brexit, taking back control of our laws, our border and our money, and we leave the European Union as one country. Let us work in the coming days to achieve that objective.
Well, on ground, well, if the honourable gentleman really feels he must. But he has been represented by his right honourable friend. But if he really wants to, briefly, I don't mind. But we really must be. Yeah, no. Well, the generosity of spirit. Mr. Alistair Carmichael.
For her assurance, Mr. Speaker, that the motion that will be brought on Monday will be amendable. And can I seek your guidance about how we, on this side of the House, and indeed on that side of the House as well, who want to see this matter put to a people's vote, might on Monday be given the opportunity to do so, including the opportunity given to the Leader of the Opposition, now that we know there is not to be a general election?
Response to the Right Honourable Gentleman, apart from thanking him for his point of order, is to say that if there is an amendable motion of which the Prime Minister, on behalf of the Government, has given notice, manifestly there will be an opportunity for people to table amendments. And we shall have then to see what happens. The Right Honourable Gentleman wouldn't expect me to make a commitment in advance, but I know what he thinks and I've heard what he said. We come now to the adjournment. The whip to move. Thank you. The question is that this House do now adjourn. Honourable members do not wish to hear the Honourable Gentleman, the member for Solihull, dilate on the matter of car production in Solihull, which seems an unaccountable choice on their part. I hope that they will leave the chamber quickly and quietly so that the occupant of the chair can hear the honourable gentleman deliver his oration. Thank you.
He must have been. What that makes one of us. Yeah. Do you want him to be? That's no problem. So I'll
We come come now to the adjournment, when I can divert the whip from the attention of his honourable friend, the member for Mid-Bedfordshire, who's whispering into his ear, no doubt extremely meaningfully. But if I can just distract him for a moment. We come now to the adjournment. The whip to move.
American history. Simply put, President Trump has completely abandoned American workers. Well, if President Trump isn't going to stick up for American workers, we Democrats will. Thank you. Next, I would like to call on Leader Hoyer.
Thank you very much, Senator Schumer. I want to congratulate the leader in the Senate, Chuck Schumer. He and I came to this Congress together in the 97th Congress. And
he had black hair and I had hair.
I want to thank this shy and retiring, underpaid person, Tiffany Lowe. Wow. Go get him, girl. I want to thank Bobby Scott for his leadership. Speaker Pelosi, who, as she said, the last time we were in charge, one of the first things we did was raise the minimum wage. It was not enough then. It is clearly not enough now. I want to thank Senator Murray for her leadership, Representative Pocan and Representative Murphy, a good friend, and all of those who have joined with us. Senator Sanders, thank you for your leadership. For the least of these, as my faith tells me, we ought to pay attention, not to the wealthiest of these, but the least of these.